Now, Nanny, you were born in a little village in Trinidad, Tunapuna.
Oh, no.
No, in 1900 though. That's your birthday. Where were you born then? What was your
Cowra.
Cowra?
Yeah.
Where is that?
It was a little village at one time, but it's no longer there. It's all gone.
Hmm.
They have broken even all the graveyards and everything. They've broken up.
Now, tell me what
small-
Cowra was like. What was it like
A small
living there?
village.
Mm-hmm.
A small, what they would think you were prosperous if you owned a house
Mm-hmm.
and a bit of land,
Mm-hmm.
and coffee and cocoa and bananas.
That's what they grew there.
Yeah. But the thing is, my father didn't have it legally. Their mother just gave the boys this one a piece of land and that one. Apparently my grandparents must have been pretty well off. Came from Venezuela. At least my grandmother did. I never knew my grandfather. He was either dead before I was born or when I was very small.
Mm.
But I knew her, she was from Venezuela. So she gave a piece of land to this son, another piece.
What did they look like? Indian people or
No.
dark or
Oh no, not dark.
Spanish?
I only knew her, I told you. I didn't know my grandfather. But I did know my grandfather's brother.
Mhm.
Wait a minute. My grandfather's brother. He was brown skinned.
Mm-hmm.
They were probably had Carib
Indian.
part of that, I
Mhm.
imagine. But my grandmother was like, but my grandfather's brother, I knew him.
They spoke Spanish, right? Did they
Oh,
speak
yes.
English at all?
Oh no, my grandmother didn't speak English at all. And
What was your grandmother's name?
Mauricia
Oh,
Castillo. But I think her maiden name was Plaza, somebody told me, I'm not sure.
mm-hmm.
But she definitely came from Venezuela. And when I knew her, she was all crippled up. She walked with a crutch.
Mm-hmm.
So she must have had something with her hip or something. She
Mhm.
wasn't well. But I knew her. She lived in a village, see, real close to the school.
Mm-hmm. Near Cara.
Yeah. Well, it's not near. That's the name of the place. It's Cowra. The village
Mm-hmm.
and all that area. It's you know where Tunapuna is? Well, it's further away
Mm-hmm.
in the country.
In the country.
So we had to walk miles to school.
Mm.
But my grandmother lived near the school, so at recess we could come from the school to the house to visit her.
Mm-hmm.
See.
And what did they do?
Who?
Your family. What did they do for a living?
Well, I told you they had what they call an estate, which is really a small farm.
Mm-hmm.
My uncle had one and my father had one, but my father died according to a death certificate that I had to get when Fred was going into the Air Force. All that they wanted. He was only 32 years old when he died.
Your father.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you see, I didn't know much about him. I can only remember seeing him lying in the bed and a lot of people around, and they told us to go and pray for him.
How old would you have been then?
Oh, I don't know. Maybe 4 or 5.
Oh, and you remember that?
But, oh yes, I remember him sitting in the bed,
Mm-hmm.
and they were putting plaster on him,
Mm-hmm.
and for all the death certificate said something else. But for all you know, he might have had appendix. Who knows?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's
See?
true. There wasn't much medical care then.
Oh no.
Would there have been a doctor?
Well, a doctor came to the village, to
Mhm.
the school, once in a while. So you had to take all the patients to the school. You can imagine how much time he's going to spend on a
Mhm.
whole school full of patients.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, you had,
Were there local medical people like
No.
Midwives or?
No, it's
No?
only a little village.
Nothing. Mm-hmm.
They call it an estate, but it's only a small farm with cocoa and coffee.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember we had a cocoa house where you dry the cocoa, but it was on wheels.
Mm-hmm.
That was fun. We used to get on top of the house, low, and roll it and get a ride.
Hmm.
You roll it away from the tray that had the coffee
Yeah.
or the cocoa, so it will dry.
So then they would harvest the cocoa and sell it
Oh yes, sell it in the village.
in the village.
Yeah.
And people would use it, or would it be shipped away somewhere?
Oh no, you made your own coffee
Mm-hmm.
from scratch.
Yeah.
You have to roast it, and you have to sift it, and you have to grind it. Same
Mhm.
with cocoa. You made your own.
Made it all.
There was no such thing.
Mm-hmm.
Everything had to be made from scratch. But when he died, my aunts and uncles, since he didn't have any legal, they took the place away.
Mm-hmm.
But they gave my sister and I a house. We had
Christina?
Pardon?
Christina and you?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
House in Tunapuna. It's still there.
Mm-hmm.
And it had quite a bit of land. They would either give us that or give us $200 each.
Hmm.
And $200 was a lot of money
Oh, really?
in those days.
Would the house be worth that much?
Well, it was.
That's $400.
Later on, it was sold for thousands and thousands of dollars.
Mhm.
Later, much later.
Which house was that? The one that Fell lived in for a while, or?
No, that was
That's a
St.
different
Joseph's.
house. Mm.
That was a better house.
Mhm.
I was with her when she bought that. But the house in Tunapuna, it had a front facing the street, and part of it used to be a store before we got it. And then in the back of that, there was a small house, that's where we lived. But there was a lot of land further on,
Mhm.
because Chris built 2 houses on the land after that,
Oh.
and she lived there for quite a while.
How old would you have been then?
Oh, you mean when the houses were built?
Mm-hmm.
Well, much older. I mean, I was married and left and
Oh, that was after.
Yeah. Came to Canada. Not Canada. I went to New York.
Mm-hmm.
Took us 21 days to go to New York.
On
from
a ship?
Canada. On a ship.
Mhm.
And we stopped at every little place.
Yeah, I'm going to ask you about that, but what was it like living in Trinidad then?
What do you mean?
What was life like?
Ordinary, like you live in a small farm.
People
Yeah.
were poor.
Pardon?
People were very poor.
Well, sure, people. But if you own a house and the land and the fruits and stuff,
Mm-hmm. Then you can live.
you are not that poor.
How many of you were there?
Oh, my mother and my father and my 2 kids. I mean, the 2 of us, Chris.
You and Christina. What about Uncle Fell then?
Oh, he was born much, much later.
Mm-hmm.
He's 11 years younger than I am.
Mm-hmm. And then what about Millie, the other?
Well, I didn't even know I had a, you mean my half-sister?
Yeah.
I didn't even know I
So
had
she
a
wasn't around then.
No, she lived in St. Joseph.
Is she
I
still
didn't-
alive?
No, she's dead. I didn't even know I had a half-sister until, I think it was maybe when my father died, or my grandfather, or my grandmother, that one of my aunts brought her and told me she was my half-sister. I never knew
You
her.
didn't know.
She was older, said.
Mm-hmm. How did people travel then in Trinidad? By horse?
On your 2 feet.
Yeah.
Sometimes like people who live further in Manchuria, in those places, sometimes you'd have to carry a patient 22 miles on your back.
To see the doctor?
That's right,
Mm.
to the village.
My
To
goodness.
see the doctor that would come.
No horses or?
Oh yes, if you could ride, but if you're very sick, you can't ride.
No, that's true.
And if you have a horse,
Mhm.
so you would carry this person 4 men, you know,
Mhm.
a bunch of men, they take turns.
Yeah.
But they would be walking all that distance.
In that heat too.
And in that heat.
Mhm.
But they didn't seem to mind,
Mm.
because you'd have to treat them, you know, give them rum and this and that.
Mhm.
For sure.
So you must have been very healthy then. You
Oh,
weren't
yeah.
sick a lot.
Well, I was healthy when I got married, but I only weighed 99 pounds.
Mhm.
The
How
day-
old were you when you got married?
23.
23. And that's when you went to New York?
Yeah, we went straight to New York.
Mhm.
But I told you it took 21 days, I think it was, to get there, stopping. We stopped at Bermuda. We even went to a movie there.
Do you remember that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, I was 23 years old then.
Mhm.
And then we went to Grand Central Station. We took a train.
Right.
And then the cousin who came to meet us was somebody from Trinidad, was my husband's cousin.
Mhm.
But she was only a visitor in New York,
Mhm.
so she really didn't know the place. We had a hard time finding the apartment where my sister-in-law lived, Aunt Julia,
Where was that?
in New York.
Which
We,
part?
we stayed with her for a while.
Which part of New York?
Oh my gosh, I don't remember.
Do you remember coming in on the ship, coming through immigration and all that stuff?
Oh yeah.
How did they treat people, immigrants?
Oh, we were treated fine. We were British subjects.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, as a matter of fact, he took long leave. He was working for the government in Trinidad,
Mm-hmm.
and he took, I think it was 3 months leave, and he got paid. And if after that time, if you want to quit, then you would send in your resignation.
Mm-hmm.
See? But if you wanted just to stay there, you can go back and get your job.
Mm-hmm. So when you arrived there, were there a lot of West Indians coming to New York?
Well, most of those that we knew were doing the same thing. They were students.
Mm-hmm. And where were they from? Most of them, the other islands or from Trinidad?
Yeah, well, from different islands.
Mm-hmm.
But we knew the ones from our island.
Mm-hmm.
More than, you know, like we have 3 of the kids have all their godfathers are doctors.
Hmm. So
only-
they all came over at that time to study.
Yeah. Only one is not a doctor, and that was Jose Inez. So that is my husband's sister's son.
Mm-hmm.
And he was only 18 at the time. Later he became a furrier. And
Yes.
we became very good friends. I went back to visit them, especially the last trip I made to New York.
Mm-hmm.
By that time they were living on the east side in a government building where you buy your own apartment, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And they were very nice to me.
So what was New York like then? That would have been in the 1920s.
Oh, wait. 6. What do you mean 1920?
When you came over from
Ah.
Trinidad to New York.
I forget. 6th of October, was it? Oh, 1923, when I was 23 years old.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It was terrible for me. The building, you just felt like it was smothered, you know.
Mm-hmm.
because
Was
you
it
were
like a
cut-
tenement building or?
Oh, big buildings.
Mm-hmm.
And they had an apartment. We stayed there until we could find a room
Mm-hmm.
with another relative who was a relative to my husband, not me.
So your husband was attending university,
To what?
Columbia University, was it?
Yes, he did. Well, sometimes he'd work days and go to school nights and, you know,
Mm-hmm.
whichever way.
And then you would work at that time.
Yeah,
What type of work did you do?
I learned how to do all kinds of things. So, the first job I got, I made $10 a week, and I thought I was rich.
Hmm.
Just putting some little papers together, you know. I didn't know. I didn't know how to go downtown. Julia's son, who was about 12 years old, he had to take me downtown. I had to take an elevated train. And then coming back, I was scared to death. As I come back, it looks dark, so early.
Mm-hmm.
So my husband and one of his cousins were standing by the elevator waiting for me. I would not have been able to find my way. One time, I was right in front of a building, and I said to a man, could you please tell me what this number? I told him the number, I can't remember now. And he says, you're right in front of it. I was scared to walk there by myself.
Is there a lot of crime?
Sure.
Robberies and people killed or just robbed?
Oh, people get killed all the time.
Mm-hmm.
I was there when they had Scarface, I forget what they call it, shoot each other, especially during the Prohibition and that stuff, kill each other. You could be walking in the street and you could get killed by mistake,
Mm-hmm.
Get shot.
Yeah.
Oh yes, it's a dangerous place.
Gangland violence.
It's well, where we lived, we tried to live in, a nice little location. Not way up in Harlem where the tough people live,
Mm-hmm.
Mostly where the students.
Mm-hmm.
See a lot of the people but afterwards.
Was that along the river?
Oh no.
No.
Oh no, on the west side.
Mm.
That's around the river is where I went the last time, on the East River. We lived on the west, 114th Street and so on. But that area now is bad. Last time I was in New York, I wanted to visit somebody that I knew. And they said, oh no, you can't go there. It's too bad. Many gangs and
Drugs.
and all that stuff.
Was drugs a big problem then?
Not very, but it's much worse now. In fact, I don't remember them saying anything about drugs.
Mm-hmm.
The killings were mostly gangs for liquor and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
Had prohibition there. The day before I left New York in 1933, they lifted prohibition, that one, and they said all the hotels were cleaned out. But of course they only had wine and beer thing.
Mm-hmm.
But before that, we used to make I learned how to make wine. You were allowed to you buy the stuff in the east side and you bring it home and you mix it. And I had this druggist friend who was also from Trinidad, and his wife and I were good friends. His father owned a drugstore in Trinidad, and she showed me how to make wine. So you were allowed to buy the stuff and make it.
Mm. Did the West Indian people tend to stick together and help each other?
Well,
Or
it depends on who you meet and who you know.
yeah.
There was one woman from Jamaica. She pretended that she came from England, and of course I knew she didn't come from England the minute she opened her mouth. But when my husband came down from here and he met her for the first time, he said, what part of Jamaica did you come from? And I nearly died of embarrassment because all along she was telling me she came from England. What the? We stuck together. That's why so many of my children were at Godfather. Of course we had no radio, no nothing,
Mm-hmm.
no such thing. One of the fellows that was Winnie's godfather, he had a little radio, but he's the only one that can listen to it, and he'd come and visit us. See, my husband was the only one among those students that was married,
Oh.
and he'd come and visit us, and he's listening to the radio, and there was
Like a transistor radio.
yeah, that's all we had. I never saw radio before. And of course there was a special thing on Friday night or Saturday night. They used to make chow with cow heel and what is it? What do you call that vegetable that have lots of seeds? Cucumber, I think it is.
Oh,
It's a long vegetable, I could see,
Cucumber.
yeah. But you had to have that special thing. I forget all the stuff they put in it. And you'd have tea or coffee or whatever. Have a treat. We'd go to bed and we'd tell him lock the door when you go home. Because he's the only one listening to the music. Well, he became a doctor, and then sent the younger brother, sent for the younger brother, he became a doctor too. So they, my children's godfather. And then there was another one from Port of Spain. What was his name? He went out west to where Joey lives, that area. I forget his name now. He's dead too. He became quite a famous doctor. He never practiced, but he was in charge of a huge hospital. It took a whole block. And he took me there and showed me the whole thing, you know. And he entertained me. He married to an American woman. She took me and Marcella out to see all kinds of gardens and all kinds of like coconuts growing in indoors, you know, all that stuff, and treated us very nice. And at the time when I got to New York, another man, another doctor, told me that the one in the States had got a big sum of money, but it was only money to do the work, you know. So right away he got so many relatives that he never knew he had. So I went there and came back home, and I forgot about that. And after I came home, I wrote to Joey, and I told him that his godfather was living in such a place not far from him, that he should go look him up. So when he went, Julian Blash, that was his name. When he went, Julian happened to be in Washington, and his wife was an American, so she doesn't know who Joey is, until he told her that his father was in Canada, and then who he was. So then she knew, because he heard him talk about, you know. So the next time that I went looking for them, and they treated me very, very nice. But he was unlucky. He had a son and a daughter. They were not at home. They were in school somewhere else. And after I got back home, a few years after, his son was under a car, fixing his car, and the car fell down and he got killed. Joey phoned me and told me. So I never got to see his son or his daughter.
So then after that, you started having kids when you were in New York. You had 2 children in New York?
Yeah. What do you mean 2? They were all born.
They were all born in New York?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Oh,
Yeah.
sure.
So then, but then...
Ray was born in 25, Joey in 27, Fred in 29, and Sylvia in 31. They were all born in New York.
And then your husband went from Columbia, he went to Dal to study medicine?
Oh, he came, you mean he came to Canada?
Yeah. And you stayed in New York
Yeah.
to work?
Well, I went to Trinidad. 1927 he came up here.
Mm-hmm.
I went home and I took the 2 kids home, and I left them with my mother-in-law.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, Joey was only a baby. Oh, gee, I was stupid.
How long did they stay there?
Oh, and I grieve so much about that, because he was only 4 months old when I took him.
Yeah, that must
Oh,
have
well,
been-
my mother offered to come, God bless her, and bring them back. My mother-in-law had them before. I left them with my mother-in-law, because she was much better off than my own mother. The 2 boys were working, so I figured, and she had a maid.
What was your mother-in-law's name?
Claudine Waddell.
Oh, yeah. Abbott. She was Claudine Abbott
Yeah,
from St. Vincent.
that's what they told me later. I never knew her name was Abbott, but somebody told me. Anyway, my mother brought them back. They were not there. By the time she brought them back, what year? I think it was a year and a half, I forget now. She brought them back. She
To
offered,
New York.
yeah, and she stayed with me until I came this way, and she went home. And she never saw them again. I went to Trinidad, you know.
How long were they in Trinidad?
Oh, they were there, maybe a year, less than a year. When we went there, Winnie could talk. She could talk from the time she was 18 months old. See? And she always said that. One night we were talking, and he said, and she never stopped talking yet. But she was really bright, and oh my, and let me see, what did I do? Not only did I take my 2 kids, but I took a kid for a friend from Trinidad who had this little child, and she lived in this private home. The landlady was downstairs and the baby upstairs, and she was in the crib all the time, lying down, and her head was flat from lying down, and they go to work all day. The landlady come up once in a while and stick a bottle in the child's mouth. So when they asked me if I would take her, I said yes. So I took my 2 kids and an extra one.
So you looked after the extra one too?
Of course, I took her in a boat.
No, but I mean when you got to New York.
Oh, no. No, this was going from New York to Trinidad.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
See? But a lot of people came to meet that little kid. They lived in a different part, you know, not in Port of Spain. And the grandmother and the uncle and the aunt, they came. And there was a man on the boat that knew them too. He was a school teacher, but he was visiting New York, and he was on his way back. And he used to, and I'm not a good sailor. I can't stand boats. I get a terrible headache. So I would have to put her on the low. I had it 4 bounce. So Joey was on the top because he was a baby, he can't fall down. And then I put the little girl on the lower one, but I would have to tie it so she wouldn't fall out. But this man who was from Trinidad and knew them, he used to take her on the, what do you call it?
On the deck?
Yeah, to give her fresh air.
How long would the trip take?
Oh, I think it took about 9 days, I can't remember now. Or 14, no, I think it took 14 days, I can't remember. But the captain was nice, he'd come down and say, are you the lady with all the kids? And I had to wash the diapers, when the soil ones that just threw them overboard. And then I had a line, he was quite nice. I had a line there with drying the ones that had just wet, you know. Oh, what a time. So I took that child. I was glad I did it though, because I did a favor for that little child. And the people, before I came back to New York, I went to visit her. And she couldn't walk or anything because she was tied up in the bed all the time. But when I went to visit her, she was up and around and running around, you know. It was outside of where I lived.
So then when you came back to New York, you worked?
Of course.
Yeah. What type of work did you do?
Everything in a line of machine.
In factories?
Yeah. I learned how to, first of all, I learned how you examine dresses, and you find something with a little tear, you give it to the other girl, you know, that stuff. Then I learned how to, Chris knew before me, she was a lot bolder than I was. She learned how to do the hem stitching machines. And then she got permission from the boss to teach me on a Saturday when they were not working. So we said, okay. And I worked there for about 5 years. So 2 Jewish brothers. They were very good. They were very nice to me.
What was their name? Do you remember?
Oh, I can't remember their names.
Where was that?
In New York.
I know, but where?
Oh, I can't remember. Anyway, when things got slow for them, they besides this hem stitching and stuff, they did cleaning, you know, and pleating and all that stuff. And when their factory got slow, one of the bosses got me a job in another factory.
Hmm. What was conditions like for working?
Well, I don't know, what do you
Was
mean?
was it hot and crowded and?
Oh, yes,
Yeah.
very hot.
Mhm.
In the summer,
Mhm.
sometimes so hot you have to close down the factory.
How did the people get along?
Well, depends on who you're working with.
Mhm.
We happen to get, these 2 guys were nice. Although they have fights and they kill each other.
Mhm.
If you have to be careful. At one time, I got out on the wrong side, on the right street, but I got out, I was supposed that time to go on the east side, because I did everything. When I couldn't get work in my line of work, I find something else. Made hats,
Mhm.
you know, made them from scratch, or trim them, you know. They give you the hat, and you put all kinds of stuff around it.
Mhm.
I learned how to make hats. So when the factory's slow, you find something else to do.
Were they mostly West Indian women working in those factories?
No, there were all kinds of people.
From all over?
All kinds. Lots of people from Puerto Rico and lots of Spanish-speaking people.
Mhm. So would you speak Spanish in there, in the
course.
factories? Yeah.
Well, if I know somebody. Oh, and one time another Spanish girl from Venezuela, we went to work in a candy place where they made candy. Not only candy, they used to make the little boxes, you know, I forget the name of it, put the things together. Piecework,
Mhm.
$14 a week.
When would that have been?
Oh gosh. Oh, I can't remember the year.
1920s though.
Yes. No, I only went there 1923, wasn't it?
Mhm.
I forget now. Anyway, we worked there for a while. We had to take a train, and then there was a bus for the women to take them from the train to the factory, but the men had to walk, you know.
Mhm.
And I did those little cookies, you put them together, and you put the icing in between, you know, and then you put the other piece on it. Piecework.
Mhm.
And if you're fast, then you can make, the more you make, the more you'll get paid. But people are so mean, they wouldn't go and get their boxes, they'll take yours, you know, I'll bring mine and put there. And one time, I can't remember what happened, and one of them was taking my boxes. And one of the Spanish girl from Puerto Rico, she said, if she said anything to you, she said, I'll beat her up. So one day I said to myself, what the heck am I doing in this place? I'm quitting. So I quit. And I went home. I didn't have any kids then. I quit and I went home and waited until I got the kind of job that I was a cop. But I tried everything.
Yeah.
And when I learned one machine, then I learned different machines. By the time I left, I knew how to do a whole lot of machines.
Mhm.
Like you make hems, and you have to use something for the size, you know, and you do the hem stitching and all the embroidery stuff that you wear like this. You do all that work. So the more qualified you are, of course. The union pay was $28 a week,
Hmm.
and that was union.
What do you remember about the war?
War. I was here when the war broke out.
What about the Depression? Were you in New York then, or were you in?
Oh, sure. When all the banks went broke.
Yeah. What do you remember about that?
I remember. I remember losing money that I borrowed to see me through when I had Fred, I think it was. And all the banks went broke, and I lost the money that I borrowed, which I had to pay back. But it was years later before I paid it. Every now and then people committed suicide. That was terrible. 1942, I think it was. And there was a nice little store where we got West Indian stuff. You know, and they had nice eggs and stuff, and I didn't like that stuff. Run by a woman and her son and a daughter, and she had another younger daughter. He was only a young boy. And when these 42 banks went closed in one day, he committed suicide. He went on the 116th Street, where it was the highest elevator. People used to commit suicide there all the time. They go up there and they throw themselves down. It was so sad, you know. He was so young.
Did you know anyone who killed himself?
Well, I knew this boy, I'm telling
Oh,
you.
you knew him?
Yeah.
Oh,
We used to buy there all the time because they had a lot of West Indian stuff,
mm-hmm.
you know. And they were so nice. I'm so sorry for them. And my brother-in-law called us in a factory and told us that there was a run on the bank. They were called the Bank of the United States, and there was 42 branches on them. So people they heard that they were going to close, so they were lining up. But we couldn't leave our work to go and, go to the bank. And besides that, people were waiting outside. You go and get your money, and then they wait and they hit you on the head and take your money anyway. So I lost money that I borrowed to see me through. But I was big expecting Frank to see me through for the little while. It took 2 weeks before. That's all I could afford, and 2 weeks after. Here they get so many months, and they even get the husband to get.
Did you have your children in the hospital or at home? Or?
2 of them were born in New York hospital. Forget the name of it even. And I said I wasn't having any more there. So the other 2 were born in the house. I had my mother, and I happened to have a doctor from Trinidad who he was a druggist in his own. He went to New York, and he became a doctor, and a nurse who also came from Trinidad.
So that was Sylvia and Fred that were born at home?
Yeah, 2 of them. But Joey would have died if he was born at home, because he was hemorrhaging, and I didn't know. See, I didn't know any better. I didn't know anything about blood transfusion or anything like that. And he didn't show any interest. All the other kids were sucking, nursing. And and one day he just went limp like that. And I had a nice little nurse from Puerto Rico, and she'd come in and talk Spanish to me all the time. Anyway, the head nurse came, who happened to be a Canadian from British Columbia, Newfoundland. And guess what her name was? Miss Snow. So I can never forget her name,
Yeah.
And she came and she saw the baby, and she took him away right away. And they found he was hemorrhaging. I don't know where, to tell you the truth, because I didn't know anything about blood transfusion or anything. So right away they took blood from me to test it, and they sent a telegram to my husband where he was working, in case.
Where was he then?
Oh, he was working in a sugar factory. Oh boy.
In Trinidad?
No, in New York.
Oh, in New York.
Lifting 50-pound bags, and he was only a small man, and at home he was not accustomed to doing anything. Well, I mean, just work in an office, for the government. So that was hard work for him. He'd come home, I just run the water for him, covered with sugar. When the other fellow that took him was also from Trinidad, but he was a big guy and more accustomed to hard work.
Mm-hmm.
But my husband wasn't accustomed to hard work at all.
Mm.
But he's determined. Lee is like him.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he was determined. Because this other fellow, he became a doctor too, of course, the one I'm talking about. He used to take friends there, but they wouldn't stay. They would. One fellow said to him, "In my country is mule with a stock back."
What does that mean?
In my country is a mule that carries
Oh,
those
that
things.
would carry that.
The way he said it, it's a mule with a tote back. They wouldn't stay. They couldn't stand it.
Mm-hmm.
And one day, one of the fellows, one of the Italian fellows, I don't know why they threatened my husband. And I'd say he was a smaller man, and these guys were huge, you know. I was scared to death. But there was another.
Why did they threaten him?
I don't know. They get in an argument or anything at all, you know. There was this big guy from Jamaica, I think. He said, I was scared for him to go to work, you know. They were rough people, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And he wasn't accustomed to that. And this guy from Jamaica said, if he touch you, I'll go after him, you know, like protecting him, then, you know what I
Mhm.
mean? Because he was smaller than these other guys. One time, it was raining. He worked really hard. I don't know what hardship is. And they were working under a tunnel, I think. That was another time. And water was coming down, you know, cold. Can't stand the cold, hate the cold. He punched his card and he came home. They never even missed him. They never knew. He came home and went to bed. I went to bed, worked the next day. They never even missed him. No, but he was determined. Had to make enough money for school.
Mm-hmm.
Think it was easy. When I left there was a long line of people by the church giving. The policeman would be on one side and the priest on the other to give a sandwich and a nickel to buy a cup of coffee, and the policeman just saying like that.
Hmm.
That's the condition it was. And came here, it wasn't any better.
Mm-hmm. So then your husband came here to go to medical school, and you stayed in New York
Yeah,
for how many years?
until he graduated in 1933.
So that would have been, you were there for 5 or 6 years, and he was here?
From 27 to 33.
Mm-hmm. So you would make money and support the family and then send him money here?
Oh, I used to send him cigarettes.
Or?
You could buy a pack of 12 cigarettes for $1.25.
Hmm.
And, well, that's why he'd work in the summer to make enough money to pay school fees.
Mm-hmm.
His brothers would send him a few bucks, you know.
Mm.
So, and then of course, towards the end, he had to borrow some money to see him through the last year, you know.
Mm.
So he had to go through a lot of things.
Yeah.
When we came here, things were terrible.
Really? What was it like?
No work. People standing in the morning, standing across the street there. They are willing to work, but there wasn't any work. It was only when the war broke out that this place became busy. Then people started coming from Canada.
So did you get work here when you came?
No, I never worked in this country.
Mm.
And in the office, wash, cook, clean, sew, you know, everything. Answer the phone. We didn't have any secretaries or anything.
No, so you did that work for him?
Of course, we couldn't afford it. Not only us, but all the doctors were poor. We weren't making any money.
Patients couldn't pay you?
$1 for an office call when and if you got paid.
How did people pay then?
They don't pay it. When the coal boat comes in, they would say,
When the coal boat comes in?
yeah.
But
In
did they
the
pay in other ways, like with chickens or with
Well,
wood?
if you in the country, they might do that.
Mhm.
Do your chicken or eggs,
Mhm.
stuff like that. It wasn't easy.
No. So then you came here in '33
Yeah.
with 4 kids.
I'm still here. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, you're still here.
That's right.
And then, so did he have a practice right away, or
Sylvia was. Well,
he couldn't intern or something? There was a problem with that.
He had already interned it.
But when he was supposed to intern, wasn't there something happened that he?
Well, he was interned at. Let me see there. There's a man.
But they weren't going to let him intern or something, was it?
Oh yeah.
What happened with that?
Because they were too prejudiced.
Yeah.
Why do you want to put all that down for?
Well, I'd just like to know.
Because it was very hard to get into medical school in this country.
Mm-hmm.
And they didn't want to intern you.
Mm-hmm.
She went to the, what you call, you have that sickness.
TB.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
that was one. And one was the children's.
Mm-hmm.
See? There be no women there.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't want to go to have the women or whatever. You're prejudiced.
Yeah. Were there other West Indians there then, or was he the only
No,
one?
he was the only one that year.
Mm-hmm.
There was another one that graduated the year after him, and he had to go to be interned in the States.
They wouldn't let him intern here.
No, and he was bright too. He was from Jamaica.
Who was that?
And
What
they-
was his name?
Pardon?
What was his
Oh,
name?
I can't remember now. He went, and then they told him to be back here for graduation. So he had to intern there, and then come back here
Mm.
for graduation.
Mm-hmm.
But my husband's friends, he had friends, the other guys spoke up for him. They said, if they don't intern him, they wouldn't, they spoke up for him,
Mhm.
they fought for him.
So then
Yeah.
then he got it because of
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, because one time, one of the professors, you see, God works in a mysterious way. One of the boys pulled jokes, practical jokes, and he wasn't like that because he's serious and he's not fooling around. One of the white boys pulled a chair and the professor laughed,
Mm-hmm.
and it's a big joke. And then he said, Alfred, pick up that chair, and he wouldn't do it. He knew he didn't do it, so why should he?
Mm-hmm.
So-
Why did he ask him to pick it up?
Because he was the only non-white man in there.
Oh, I see.
Get it?
Yeah.
So he refused to do it. So he said he would fail him, and he did.
Hmm.
He failed him. And that, meant a lot because, we were so hard to get the school fees without having to pay extra.
Mm-hmm.
But years later, now when we're a bit prosperous, who should he meet in the street, downtown somewhere, dead drunk? He was wetting himself in the street.
Hmm.
He was so drunk. The same guy. And he had the nerve to tell him that he had told him he was going to fail him, and he failed him. He was so drunk.
Mm-hmm.
The same one. So you see,
Yeah.
when you do mean things, sometimes it comes back to you.
Mm-hmm. There must have been a lot of prejudice then.
Oh, gosh, terrible. They
Mhm.
couldn't get into medical school. Most of the ones that were here, they would take the pre-med, but then
Mhm.
they would go to Europe.
So how did he get in? He must have just had very good marks and done very well.
Yeah, he had good marks.
Mm-hmm.
He got in.
And then didn't he tell them that he was going to go back to Trinidad, so that's why they let him stay
Well,
there?
we had planned to go back.
Mm-hmm. So why did you end up staying then
Why did
in
we
Halifax
stay?
if it was so
Because
difficult?
by the time that we could make a bit of money, it was time for our own kids to go to school.
Oh.
So you'd have to send them back here or
Mhm.
go to England.
So in 1933, did he have a car then, and he would go on house
No.
calls? And
Car.
so how would he get to house calls if he
On
had
his
to go?
feet.
Just walk.
Oh, the patient. If they want him to go to Hamlin's Plain, somebody come and get him.
Oh, I see.
It took ages before we could get a car.
Mm.
And then you get an old car that's falling apart, that
Mhm.
all the oil is leaking out of it, you know.
So what areas did he practice in then? Where was his office then?
It was Paddington Street,
Mm-hmm.
terrible place. I don't even want to remember. It wasn't easy.
So you worked in the office for him then?
I worked in everywhere. We had
Mhm.
nobody had any secretaries.
Yeah. Did he have many patients then, or
Not at the beginning, no.
no? Maybe mostly local people, probably
Many.
poor people. And
Yeah, the worst ones, the ones that the white doctors wouldn't go near them. You know.
Mm-hmm. So this-
Psychiatric and those places.
Mm-hmm. So we went there too. And
But you did, yeah. But you didn't have any money.
no.
So,
Mm.
yeah, anyway,
Where did you live then?
terrible place. We lived in the same place where the office was.
Oh, on Gottingen Street.
For a while. And then we moved to Garrett Street. It wasn't any much better. A
Mm-hmm.
little bit, you know. We rented a place there, and then I rented part of it to another nice little couple in town.
Mm-hmm.
I don't even want to remember all that.
So then did he work at the hospitals as well, or
Yeah. I
he would
don't
have
think-
patients there at the hospital?
No, I don't think so.
No.
Oh, I don't remember. When you send him to the hospital, the other doctor take over.
Oh, I see.
You think it was easy like this, like you fellows have it?
Mm-hmm.
Hmm. Only the war made this place busy.
What happened then?
Oh, there are lots of people now then. People coming off of ships.
Americans mostly, or?
Or West Indians or any one. They don't want that, their doctor. They want a private doctor.
Hmm.
When we were on Brunswick Street, little lineup, we'd have people outside waiting.
Hmm.
See,
So
they
it got a
didn't-
lot busier then.
Oh, yes, during the war,
During the war, yeah. So then his office was on Brunswick Street?
yeah.
Was that a better office than?
All of, it was there up until he died.
Mm-hmm.
All that side of Brunswick Street was nice. All doctors, all along,
Mm-hmm.
a retired doctor, and all along that side of the street, not on this side. But they were all poor. They were
Mhm.
not making any money.
Mm-hmm.
And our house, a 3-story house, and on this side was a doctor, but he was in the army. He was not practicing.
Mm-hmm.
And then further down, the next house was where Gertrude then lived. And the next house was the home of the guardian angel, where the sisters had these little kids, you know, little
Mhm.
orphans. He used to wait on them a lot, his kids. She,
Would he ever get paid for that work, or was that all?
I don't think so, no, he wouldn't charge them. Sisters were not, they didn't have any money. Sisters were poor. The kids were poor. I think of those kids, how spoiled they are today. I was there one time, and his sister, I took some candy over for the kids, and his sister came, and she gave the kids, each kid a little bowl of soup
Mm-hmm.
and a little piece of bread. And then you can tell some of them that might satisfy them, but some others, you know, they eat it up. You can tell that they could have more, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And that's all they'll get, a piece of bread and a bowl of soup and I think a glass of milk. See, you know, some kids will eat less than others. But they were poor, the sisters didn't have, you know.
Mm-hmm.
They thought he was a Catholic, but they never knew, and he never told them. He said one time to me, sister said, come and see our new altar. And he said, I didn't know what to do. I said, well, do whatever she does. So he didn't know what he was supposed to do. Oh, I laughed. But there were doctors all the way down. They were all broke. One doctor, you know what he used to do? He would buy the drugs from the druggist, and the druggist will give him discount, you know, and he would sell the drugs to the patients.
The middleman.
Huh?
He was the middleman.
Well, to make some extra money.
Mm-hmm.
You're not supposed to do that, but he did it.
Mm.
You know, they were really poor.
So then you were living on Brunswick Street?
Yeah.
How long did you live there?
Oh, for quite a while. And we bought a house on Atlantic Street,
Oh, yeah.
but he stayed there. So.
Mm-hmm.
And we bought a little house. He bought a little house on Barrington and I forget the name of the street. Not up that way. And let's see. When the war was over and they broke up all the city, they started from across that house.
Hmm.
But only business places. They didn't break people's homes. And they broke everything from there all the way.
Oh, you mean the big riot?
Yeah,
Yeah.
all the way down Barrington Street. And when they finished with Barrington Street, they went on Hollis Street.
Mm. Do you remember that?
Of course, that was in 1946, I think it was,
Mm.
when the war was over.
Yeah.
They tell the people, go have a good time, and they close everything up.
Mm.
And then they ended up by taking the bus, the streetcar, they push it in the ocean. They broke Bugs Diamond House, they one of the fellows that used to deliver the different things, you know, the diamonds and stuff that we knew, he was a patient. In fact, I bought the silver set that I have. He brought it to the house and sold it to me. Anyway, him and his boss were across the street, and he can see them smashing the windows and throwing the mattress out. And they take those mattresses and they put them in the park and stuff.
So were you watching all this going on, or was it?
No, we were not here.
Oh.
So that day, we happened to go to the cottage, and it was quiet, you know, very quiet. There was nothing going on. And we met a man on the, gas was rationed and everything, you know. We met a man, a soldier, going that way, and he was coming a ride. So my husband gave him a ride up as far as our cottage, but he had to go even further. He was going to Hubbard's, and he said that his wife only had a little bit of gas, and he didn't want her to come and meet him because she needed for groceries. He had come from Divert to here, and then he was going there to visit his family. And you know, on the way, we spent a whole day in a cottage, and on the way back, then we meet the same man and gave him another lift to Halifax.
So when you
So
got...
we didn't know anything. When we were living on Atlantic Street, and back of Atlantic Street, there was a place for the soldiers, but they were nice and quiet. They didn't get in any trouble. And so much so that Fred, who was just a young kid then, he used to he had a job, and my husband laughed, say, what a job. He'd take the mail from there and take it up to the other place, you know, on Godigan Street, I think it was, back and on his bicycle, you know. Anyway, when we got home, some of the little neighbors said, there was a riot, and there's a curfew, and you can't keep your lights on and all. And we thought they were joking, because they were always putting some practical jokes on me. They'd tell me these kind of stories, and I believed them, you know. So they said, put the radio, we had radio then, put the radio on, and then we really heard the news. So the next day, when we went on Barrington Street, it was all, Winnie was working on Barrington Street. Now, I can't remember if it was in a drugstore. I think it was in a drugstore. But by that time, all the stores were smashed up. Both Diamond Place and all the 5 and 10 cent store, Metropolitan, the whole place, and it was all boarded up.
What about your
Like-
place on Barrington Street? Did
like
it
a
get
cook.
smashed?
Well, that's where I mean. on Barrington Street.
Oh, but I thought you said you had a house there, and that's where they started.
Oh, way up there.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you started from up there down.
Oh.
A grocery store on this side. They only go after business places.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they didn't break private homes.
Mm.
In fact, I had some sailors staying in the house, and they were very nice and quiet, and they were hungry. They couldn't find anything to eat.
Mm-hmm.
Everything was closed.
Yeah.
It was. I had read about Ghost Town, and so that's what it looked like.
Mm.
All boarded up.
So during that time also you helped a lot of the West Indian students, didn't you?
Oh yeah, we had a lot of students.
They'd rent from you or stay at your place?
Oh no, no, they could, whenever they come, but
Mhm.
they were not renting.
Mm.
They were, whenever they came, we always fed them, especially, some of them were staying at Winnie's, a couple of them,
Mhm.
you know, very, very nice people. There was one fellow from the States, his father was a doctor too. I
Mm.
went to church one day, and I came out, I can always tell when somebody is a stranger, you know. You're always so well dressed and you look so nice, you know. So I came out to church and I said good morning, and I said, and you from the, oh I forget, Pine Hill residence, that's where they used to be, the men's residence. It was strictly a men's residence. And I could see that there were strangers, and I went up and talked to them, asked them where they were from. And he said from Trinidad. And I was amazed. Well, they came from New York, or Connecticut. And then come to find out that his uncle in Trinidad was a druggist. And he had come from Trinidad to the States, and he was a doctor. But he was bringing, he'd sort of show you how fussy people were. He was bringing his maybe 16 years or so, son to Dalhousie. But he wouldn't trust it, let him come by himself. So then when I told him my name, he said, oh, we were coming to visit you. He said the students told us about doctor, and we were coming, and they did come. And when he went back to New York, he wrote a lovely letter saying how we met in the church and all that. And he was a very wealthy doctor in Connecticut. And his son became your godfather.
Mm-hmm.
Ronnie
James.
Yeah. And he still, when he comes once in a while, he goes to the cottage and visits Sylvia.
Mm.
But last time, it's quite a while since he came. He used to come with a couple other men. Well, his father died studying too.
Mm.
Patient. The night that Alf died, he was with Ron.
Who
Ron
was?
Bell.
Ronnie James was.
Ronnie James was visiting Ron Bell. And the two of them, Ronnie James was at our house first. And he went away, and him and Ron Bell went to Brunswick Street to get the car. Because your grandfather couldn't drive the car, he came in a taxi. So he had a brand new car over there. So the two of them came in one car to pick up this other car. And then I think Ron went home, and then, after that he said if he had known, he would have stayed all night with us, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So, you're right, you see, I got my eye hurt. Like, he told me to get a certain pill for him, and I got it, some milk. And he went to bed, and I thought he was asleep. And I kept called Sylvia, kept telling her to go upstairs and see, you know, how big that house was up and down.
That was on Quimple Road.
Yeah, and here they complain about little steps.
When did you move into that house?
Oh, gosh, I think it was in 1946. I'm not quite sure.
So the whole family was
And
living there.
I had a house. That house on Atlantic Street was in my name, and then your mother. Your father took that one,
Mm.
and we moved to that. See? I minded you kids, you know. I minded you good too. I had a veranda full of kids,
Mm.
and they had to put a gate because the kids would get away. Ruth said one time, gee, they really had it good. All the kids, but Linda, you couldn't trust her because she was tall enough that she could turn the knob and go out. And she went, one time she went to she went to the show here on the Oxford Street. She took Shelley with her. And Linda and whoever, another girlfriend, they were so taken up with this show. They never noticed that Shelley walked out. And here she's on the other side. Shelley was smart, you know. On the other, good thing I happened to be on the lawn because I would not have heard her if I was upstairs or in the back. She stood on the other side of the street and she said, "Nanny!" Well, I was so scared that she would come across and get killed. I told her to stay there. I went across and got her. Linda didn't know she had left.
So also when you lived in the bigger house, you had entertained people like show business people and well-known people?
Well, we had a girl one time that came from the carnival. She had got a prize. She had got a prize. The prize was to come to Canada for a visit. Sylvia got tickets. Sylvia was working in a drugstore.
Mm-hmm.
Through the boss, she got tickets.
Mm-hmm.
And a girl and her escort came to visit.
But then didn't Cab Calloway stay there?
Oh yeah, we
too?
had Cab Calloway.
Mm.
Was it in that house? Yeah. Oh, how we met. No, we were on Atlantic Street when Cab Calloway was there. How we got Cab Calloway. The doctor, let me see. I forget how we managed to get him. The doctor that was supposed to go, it was a boxing match or some match or something. I think it was something at the Forum. And the doctor that was supposed to go asked my husband to go in his place. And then we heard that this Cab Calloway they refused him. He made arrangements to go to the Lord Nelson, but when they found that he wasn't really black, he was brown skinned. But his manager was white, but the rest of them were black. They wouldn't let him in.
Mm.
So they had to go, and he had a girl with him. The singer was a lady, you know, and his own wife. They had to stay at the Seamen's Club, which is a rough place only for men. And these two women were there. So when my husband heard that, he went backstage at the Forum and he spoke to him. Oh, I think he sent him. Oh, I called him, I forget, I can't remember now. And anyway, we took them with us to Atlantic Street.
Mm.
Him and his wife and his singer. The rest of the men, they stayed in the Seamen's Club.
Mm.
And they stayed there for while they were here. And they were so glad, the woman was so glad to have a kitchen where she could, have the meals.
Sounds like there was a lot of racial prejudice then.
Oh, sure. It sure was.
Was Halifax bad for that?
Pardon?
Was Halifax bad for that?
Is it bad?
Was it bad then for
Oh,
prejudice?
sure. They couldn't get into medical school. So they just did pre-med and they went someplace else.
Mm-hmm. These are West Indians, you mean?
They went to West, they blocked it with university. I think there was one fellow that was a lawyer, I think. There was one other doctor who had been here before, also, I think, from the West Indies, but he couldn't make a go of it, so he had to leave.
Mm.
And there was another one that was from another island. He was a dark fellow, but he just went down and down and down.
Mm. So there couldn't have been many West Indians here besides you in Halifax then.
Not many. And there was another one who was a lawyer, a real black fellow. He built a couple of places on Cretan Street. You know, you wouldn't get a good house in any place. Well, it's lots of prejudice. Well, it's like, I don't like to remember. But slowly everywhere. Even when I bought that house there on Atlantic Street, the woman next door, the one in the front house, she wouldn't talk to me. But after a while, when they found out that I was as good as them and even better, they changed.
Mm-hmm. And then the kids too had problems, didn't they? One time you told me about Joey and Fred in the swimming pool. There was something happened.
Oh yeah, when they had a swimming pool. That's true, at the Commons.
What was that? What happened with that?
Well, I think they let Fred in with the white kids because he was lighter, and they wouldn't let for Joey in, something like that. So I called up the city and I gave them help. If I say that, you know what Sylvia saying? You talk. No, I didn't even say hell to her. You talk just like a gangster. The least, it's not funny. It just hurt my feelings.
Sometimes that's how you have to talk to get...
No, but I mean, I say to her, well, I would have fallen down and finished myself.
What other things happened?
Yeah, that's all.
Mm-hmm.
Like when we first bought the house, the first house, we had some good friends though. There was a nice doctor he was my husband's classmate, he became his best friend. He was from the island,
Mm-hmm.
an entirely different champ, Holland. And he signed a note for my husband with the drugstore, Coombs drugstore, introduced him to me. And so that he could sign a note for him. And you see, later my husband built up the drugstore because of have his letterhead.
Mm-hmm.
And when he went to get the money from the Bank of Montreal on Gargan Street, he said, the bank manager said to him, don't come back and tell me that the roof is leaking. And my husband was a very sensitive man, you know. He knew he was honest and we were honest. And so he told me, but I used to do all the paying, see? He did the work, but I paid everything everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
And I cut every corner to make sure that I would pay that money. If I couldn't pay it, I would just go and pay the interest.
Mm-hmm.
See? And as long as you did that, your credit was good. I remember one time I couldn't pay the phone bill. That's how bad things were. So they cut off the phone. Other people have phones that didn't need it, but they figured it out to need it. So I went in the bank. No, I went and paid the phone bill, and then I went in a drugstore and I called them up and I said, what's the big idea of cutting off the phone? So you didn't pay the bill? Said the bill is paid. It's the only time I said a little white lie. So they put it back on. Because if it didn't, then you would have to put it back on.
Mm-hmm.
You say, okay. So you see, it wasn't easy.
No, so they didn't want to lend him money because they were prejudiced against him.
Oh, not only that, but they figured that, you know that some of them say, there was one company that said that doctors are bad risk.
Probably because they didn't get paid much in those days.
Exactly,
Nobody
they didn't
paid
get
them.
paid, period.
Mm-hmm.
You'd have a house full of patients. The day before I left New York, this fellow who was also from Trinidad, nice guy, who later became a millionaire. He told me, I told him I was leaving, coming to Canada the next day. He said, I made 18 calls so far, and I got paid for one. That was house calls.
Mm.
And that guy put himself through college. He waited on tables in the same university to make school fees.
Mm.
His wife didn't help him. Later he was divorced, and then he became so wealthy. He bought a house in Connecticut from a movie with swimming pool. Was a great thing in those days, you know, not common like today.
Yeah.
And that's what he told me, and years later, he was very wealthy.
So he must have thought sometimes about leaving Halifax to go back to New York or to go to
No, we
back
had
to Trinidad.
planned, no, not New York. We had planned to go back to Trinidad
Mm-hmm.
and practice there. Never got there.
Mm.
Anyway, you can't say too much. You've got to be careful. Walls have ears, you know. So you have to be careful what you say. Look, even now, didn't they beat up a boy in Peterborough because he wanted to take a course in, was it hairdressing?
I don't think that was in Peterborough, but yeah, I remember that.
Yes, it was.
Was it?
Yeah.
Something like
Oh.
that happened in New Glasgow.
Oh no, it's in where Brenda's
Yeah, New
people
Glasgow.
live. Yeah. Beat up the guy.
Yeah.
Didn't do anything.
No.
So they still have those kind of people.
Oh yes, yeah.
Still.
Still exists.
Sure. We had a bunch here one time, a long, long time ago, during the war, I think it was. And some of the white people said, well, look, we lived here for so many years with so-and-so right next door, you know. I forget what it was. They even had guns and stuff, a long way back.
Mm.
I forget.
Where was this, on Barrington
In
Street?
Halifax.
Mhm.
I forget the guy's name. Jones. He's a lawyer now.
Oh yes.
Yeah, that guy.
Rocky Jones.
Yeah, he was into that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
It was rough. It was very rough. It was very hard. Very. In fact, I don't think any of the white doctors would go to Creighton Street. I mean, Africville. But now to hear these Africville people talk, you know. He used to go there. Sometimes those poor little kids would crawl in the railroad track and get killed. And they would sell liquor in Africville, you know, on the weekends
Mm-hmm.
and stuff. And there was only a one-room schoolhouse. And the man who taught the school was a West Indian from Jamaica, I think. And his son, he saw to it that he had a crippled son, though I don't think he went to school, I don't think he could. But the other son, he went to university. What did he become? Can't remember. It's a lawyer. And he had two daughters. They left the city and they went to Toronto, where they would have, you know, Toronto,
More
Montreal.
opportunity.
He saw to it that he got educated.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, it was tough. People in Africville, they said they had a slaughterhouse not far from there. They say they used to go there and pick up bones and stuff. They were very poor.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't go to school here because, not that they were prevented from going to school, but they couldn't afford to come from there to school here.
Mm-hmm.
I remember there was one woman that we knew, she said into her class, she was the only one that went to grade 12. And she was married to a guy from Trinidad. She was very nice. So it was, but to hear these talk today, you would think it was always like this.
Mm-hmm.
They had to go use the back door. It's like they book that somebody wrote, it's called 13 Against the Odds. And they say about this famous doctor who first discovered, what did he discover? How you can make paint from soil and different things. I forget his name now.
George Washington Carver?
No, yeah, was that his name?
Mm-hmm.
And he had to go, the man who was sold for a horse, that was the name thing. He was when they had slaves, okay? He was a miserable little kid, so they sold the parents and they left this little kid, and this white woman took him and brought him up and educated him. I think that was the guy. And he became famous just by going out in the trees and, you know, he discovered different things.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, he only had to, when he went to university, he had to use the back door and all that. Then he became so prominent, people were glad to get him to lecture to them.
Mm-hmm.
See?
Changed their tune.
Exactly. But they said he cared nothing about money. Money would be, and he lived very poor, although he had secretaries and this and that. He didn't care about money.
What was it like in Trinidad? Was there a lot of racial problems there and prejudice and things? Or was it different?
Maybe prejudice when it's so mixed up.
You mean such a mixture of people?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, some people are.
Mm-hmm.
Some people think that. Depends on how much money you got. Some
Mm-hmm.
people
So it was
think,
more economic than
Yeah.
racial.
yeah, some racial too.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, some time ago, since I've been here, they had a riot. The Indians against the blacks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now the Indians are the majority in Trinidad. There's
Yeah, well,
more
they have the money,
But population-wise, they're more
Yeah.
than 50% of the
Yeah.
population.
but they would, sometimes the Indian would be dying of starvation, but they still have money, and they can beg, you know, stuff like that.
Mm.
People not kind to each other. Oh.
No.
They, there was a judge. He was he always wore the, you know how they used to wear those things.
The wig?
He was a white guy, and he was. He used to say he was a judge and went to send people to jail, you know, to pass a sentence on people. And this Indian guy one time took off his sapa and threw it at him, and he said, "Don't kill them, go die, go Calcutta." They believed that when they died, they would go there.
Oh.
You know.
This was in Trinidad then?
Yeah, that's what the courthouse, and this guy was a judge. And this judge, they claim, didn't believe in God. He was an atheist. And mind you, Julia, Aunt Julia, she used to teach their kids, but she'd have to go to their house and teach them. They were too good to go to the ordinary school with ordinary people. And one of them, poor thing, had a stroke. One of the girls, and what was his name? I forget now. And her own kids pushed her in the street and left her there. Do mischief like that, you know. They thought if you give her another shot, she'd get better or something. Anyway, years later, they said this guy didn't believe in God and he'd shoot a gun up in the air and all this kind of foolishness. But his wife did. Years later, I went to Trinidad, and who should I see in the Catholic Church in Tunapuna but this man and his daughter. By this time, there was only one left, and his son, one of his sons, became not a judge. He got a big position, I forget what kind of a position, became quite a big shot. But at first, they were too good even to go to ordinary school, you know. And he didn't believe in God, and to my great surprise to see him in the Catholic Church, going to communion, him and his daughter. Oh yes, and the son had a child by by a woman, not married. She was half Chinese and half colored. And they said somebody stabbed her and almost killed her. Her mother was stone deaf, so she couldn't hear. People claimed that they thought it had something to do with it. Oh, what she did, she went to church in the Protestant Church of England, and she took the kid, sat right in the back of them. And you know, that was a terrible thing.
Mm.
And the girl, she really looked like them. They all had little tiny chins, you know. And if you look at her, she really looked like them. But this one, that was a disgrace for her to take this child and sit right in the seat there.
Mm.
Anyway, she was a nice girl. Later, she was in New York. She was staying with my cousin Tina. You know, she was married and they had an apartment together.
Mm.
Very nice.
You always grew up in the Catholic Church and went to...
Oh,
You?
yes.
Yeah.
All my family were Catholics,
Mhm.
strictly Catholics. Now they're nothing. A lot don't even go to church. They don't even know what religion is.
Yeah, but that was always important to you, wasn't it? Your
Well, it
faith
is.
and religion.
You've got to believe in God. Look, don't say I told you, for God's sake. Judy's child is not even christened yet. It's never been christened. See, neither one. Now all he does is hockey. That's good. But you got to believe in somebody. You have to believe that there's somebody bigger, much bigger than you, much bigger than anybody. But some people only think of God when they're in trouble.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, up to now the child is a Christian.
So your faith was always important to you to get you through.
Well, shouldn't everybody have faith?
Yeah.
Doesn't matter what church you go to,
Mm-hmm.
but you should always believe in something.
Mm-hmm.
That there's somebody greater than you. One right up here on Quinple Road, and you said you want to go to the, oh, what did you call it? Because it was the first church where they use a guitar.
Oh, yeah.
You remember?
Folk
that?
mass, yeah.
Yeah. See, before it was only an organ, eh?
Mm-hmm.
So, yep. My husband's sister in Trinidad, she played in the church for years, and then suddenly they said that they fired her because she was not a Catholic. After her playing in the church for years, and they gave the job to a little Catholic girl who was only about 10 years old, but she was brilliant. Her mother was a nurse, she was a city nurse, and that girl became quite famous. She went to England, and one night I was sitting in the car waiting for Al to come with a patient, and I heard her on the radio. I forget her name now. She became quite famous in England. She was very, very bright, even though she was quite young, you know, language and that.
Do you remember any of them?
No, when you read the book. One of the doctors that I went to, you know, I went to so many specialists, I can't even remember his name. He told me about him and asked me if I ever read some of his books. This guy went to England, but he wrote stories about Trinidad, you know.
Oh, Nepal.
I can't remember his name.
Yeah, Nepal.
About how things were in those days.
Mm-hmm.
True stories, you know. And this doctor thought...
I bet you could remember some stories from Trinidad.
Hmm?
I bet you could remember some stories from Trinidad. No?
I wasn't interested in anything. I was only 23 years
No,
old.
you have a good memory, though.
When
You remember things.
Well, I remember the First World War. I was only 14 years of age.
Mm-hmm. Tell me about that.
Why, we couldn't have any food. We nearly starved. Because every time the ships would come, the enemy would sink it. And a lot of people that we knew went to the war and they never came back.
So even in the Caribbean, they would sink ships coming there?
Of course, ships coming from England or wherever, bringing food, you know,
Mm-hmm.
rice and all kinds of things. They'd sink it. Why not?
But there was no fighting there, like
Oh, no fighting there, no, but they
No.
went to the war.
at sea, yeah.
Well, they did have a riot since then. Fellow who went to school in Montreal. Don't you remember?
Mm-hmm.
And he went to Trinidad.
Yeah.
And when I was at the carnival, this guy was going around begging for money to defend them. And I saying to myself, I'm paying taxes here, they're smashing up it. I expect me to give them money to defend the people. I mean, you're in the people's country. You have to do, when you're in Rome, do like the Romans. If they want to smash up things, they're Canadian, let them smash it up. Why do you have to take part in it? You know, if you're smart, you get out of there.
Mm-hmm.
So I said to myself, you're not getting a nickel out of me.